Well, let's just wrap it up by talking about connectivity. In that we've discussed all the exciting business messaging technologies, particularly around RCS and the opportunities therein. There has obviously been an issue in that Apple customers haven't been able to get it. Now that's changed, I think, now with the development between Three UK, VMO2, and they're doing RCS messaging and a deal with Sinch.
Mhm.
And this is another. I mean, is this a disruptor or is this just sort
This
of
isn't really a
inevitable?
disruptor. This was just really a story about how the sort of slow but the progress of RCS now that it's on Apple. It's really about how Sinch is working with Three UK and Virgin Media O2 in the UK. The sort of two sort of pre-eminent networks here in the UK to roll out RCS. So now businesses in the UK have the chance to start using RCS to uh, enhance their marketing. And in many ways, it is the sort of future of messaging. I mean, you will get sort of one-time passcodes and things will just still come as a text message because you don't need any richness, but everything else will be done like this. And I think tying up with this sort of satellite coverage is this will be how businesses market to everybody, even people who are in far-flung places where they can't get any connectivity except through a satellite. So uh, that's not disruptive in and of itself. It's something we sort of is predictable. We've known about for some time. What is interesting is that at the same time, our friends at Juniper have put out their future leaders index of telecoms stuff, which has got tons in it about all sorts of things. But the thing that stuck out for me was this idea about how RCS is disrupting the messaging market, but really how the messaging market, particularly in these sort of like mature markets that we see in the US and in Europe and the sort of developed world, um, it still sort of has a finite limit. We've kind of reached sort of the limit of who's going to use it. But Juniper points out this idea of vertical messaging, which I must admit is something that was new to me yesterday when I read about it. And it's quite hard to find any real sort of substantive details about it. But the idea is that messaging companies are now starting to go after very specific sectors. So they're offering rich messaging solutions to healthcare providers, for example. And so it's a sort of closed group, can offer very specific sorts of services. So, that they'll need more specific things than just general messaging. And this, according to Juniper, is a way that the developed messaging markets are going to grow is through these sort of vertical messaging offerings. And the people it picks out as sort of leaders is three companies that I must admit, again, new to me. It's Sendbird, Front, Sleek Glow.
Paul,
Uh,
keep talking. I've got an emergency.
Okie dokie. Flagging up these three companies that do sort of, well, two of them specifically do vertical specific messaging. Now, from Juniper's point of view, what's interesting is that targeting sort of vertical. So, as I said, healthcare. It's also the kind of thing that's being targeted at retail, which again is sort of large, but sort of can be a sort of closed off user groups, sort of walled garden, and logistics. They'll have very specific messaging needs internally as businesses. This is rather than if we ignore the sort of customer facing bit, and they're very big. And the opportunity seemingly lies in supporting these vertical things with all the sort of messaging equipment and the messaging services and that kind of stuff. And it does bring in the wider network operators because they too can also, with like private 5G networks, which we've talked about a lot, can roll out sort of these bespoke services for industries, for even specific businesses, I guess, on a granular level, if you want to go that deep down into it. So it's an interesting disruption to the messaging market that sits nicely, I think, alongside this satellite thing. So we've got private 5G networks, we've got satellite connectivity, the ability to build a bespoke messaging network just for a particular business sector, or indeed, something like the UK's NHS is a big enough organisation to sort of warrant its own messaging service internally, really, amongst its suppliers and its workers, but also it could be used for messaging out to its customers, who are us, the patients. So it's that sort of opportunity. That's what Juniper sees as the sort of real area of disruption for messaging in developed markets, is how that's going to drive growth for messaging companies and messaging tech companies, because it's a new area for them to sell their kit into. But it's something that I'm looking more detailed into and need to find out more about it. But I just thought we'd throw it in there as another messaging disruptor. So all in all, with AI, messaging, satellites, the world's changing.
It certainly is. It certainly is. I do apologise for that. It was a domestic emergency. For
That's
those of you
okay.
that don't know, we've been remote working for many, many years, and yes, so sometimes, occasionally, there's a disruptor, a domestic disruptor back in
Just a disruptor in
telemedia
your own
HQ.
market.
I mean, it's interesting that you talk about. I mean, it's interesting that the idea of sort of. I don't know, sort of vertical marketing, or we talk about ecosystems a lot and the various, requirements and structures that make up ecosystems. I mean, to me, it feels, like a sort of slightly verbose way of just talking about, targeting a sector, and
Mm.
catering for its, unique and specific needs. But if it's a way for the messaging industry to develop and develop successfully, then obviously, the more messages on the network, the happier we are, and the happier clients like Horizon will be. And so that makes us, that's good news for everybody, basically. And good news for Mobile Squared and Kaleido Intelligence, who we reported that merged last in our last
Not
episode.
yeah,
So
a couple of weeks ago.
gives
Yes, absolutely.
at least it gives them something to do.
Well, yes, and we want them to have something to do.
We
Otherwise, they
do
get
want
into
them to have
trouble,
something to
as
do.
we know. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think yes, you're right. It is like focusing on a sector, but things like messaging and the internet generally has always been a very general catch-all thing that people have tried to use for them. We're now seeing that being broken down into things that are vertical specific, because that's the sort of next stage of development of these things, because that's where they've got to find growth somewhere.
They